The tactical dog hit the emergency room doors like a freight train, 90 pounds of muscle and military training breaking free from his handler, scattering personnel, ignoring every command. Security lunged. Soldiers shouted. But the Belgian Malinois had a target. He skidded to a stop in front of the one person nobody in Ridgeway Memorial Hospital ever noticed, a tired nurse in faded scrubs who kept her head down and her mouth shut. Then the dog dropped something at her feet, a scorched tactical armband. Ghost lead. The corridor went silent, because everyone suddenly realized the woman they'd spent 3 years treating like she was nobody had once been somebody the military couldn't afford to lose. If you want to see how this story ends, if you want to watch arrogance collapse and justice land exactly where it belongs, stay with me until the final word, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Ridgeway Memorial Hospital sat on the edge of Coldwater, Wyoming, where the wind never stopped, and the nearest trauma center was 2 hours away on a good day. It was the kind of place that operated on duct tape, desperation, and the unspoken understanding that if you wanted cutting-edge medicine, you should have gotten hurt somewhere else. Inside those walls, Elena Cross had learned to make herself small. At 31, she moved through the second-floor medical wing like a shadow, quiet, efficient, forgettable. Pale green eyes that avoided direct contact, brown hair pulled back in a bun that hadn't changed style in years, scrubs that had been washed so many times the fabric had gone soft and colorless. She answered when spoken to. She followed orders without question. She never corrected anyone, even when they were wrong, especially when they were wrong, because at Ridgeway Memorial there was a hierarchy, and Elena Cross existed at the very bottom of it. At the top sat Dr. Victor Kane, Chief of Medicine, 15 years of tenure, a reputation that stretched across 3 counties, and a personality that made residents cry in supply closets. Dr. Kane didn't just run the hospital, he ruled it, and he had decided from the moment Elena transferred in 3 years ago that she was beneath his notice. Cross, his voice cut across the nurse's station like a blade. Elena looked up from the medication cart she'd been restocking. Yes, Dr. Kane. Room 12 needs a blood pressure check, manually. I don't trust the machine. The machine's calibrated weekly. Did I ask for your opinion? Elena closed her mouth. No, sir. Then do your job. She nodded, set down the tray, and headed toward room 12. Behind her, one of the younger nurses, Jess Calloway, barely 2 years out of school, whispered, "He's such a dick." Elena didn't respond, because responding meant acknowledging it. And acknowledging it meant risking the fragile equilibrium she'd spent 3 years building. So she went to room 12, took the manual blood pressure reading, charted it precisely, and returned to her cart without a word. That was how Elena survived Ridgeway Memorial, by becoming invisible. But invisibility only worked if people chose not to look. The day everything changed started the same way every day started, with Dr. Kane reminding everyone who mattered and who didn't. Morning rounds, 8:15. The medical team gathered outside the ICU like soldiers waiting for inspection. Dr. Kane stood at the center, flanked by his 2 senior residents, Dr. Marcus Holt and Dr. Angela Reyes, both of whom had learned early that agreeing with Kane was safer than being right. Elena stood 3 steps back, holding the patient charts Kane would inevitably demand and then ignore. "Let's make this quick," Kane said, scanning the group with the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Bed 3. Status. Dr. Holt flipped open his tablet. 72-year-old male, post-operative day 2 following a bowel resection. Vitals stable, pain managed, on track for discharge by Friday. Kane nodded. Bed 7. Dr. Reyes stepped forward. 68-year-old female, admitted for pneumonia, responding well to antibiotics, oxygen saturation improving. Good. Bed 9. There was a pause. Dr. Holt frowned at his tablet. Bed 9 is... I don't have updated notes. Kane's expression darkened. You don't have notes? Then get them. Holt looked toward Elena. Cross, didn't you do the overnight check? Elena nodded. Yes. He spiked a fever at 0300. I started additional fluids and notified the on-call. A fever? Kane interrupted. And you didn't escalate? I did escalate. Dr. Morris adjusted the antibiotic protocol at 0400. Kane's jaw tightened. If a patient spikes a fever, I expect to be notified immediately. Not the on-call. Me. You were off shift. I don't care. The corridor fell silent. Elena swallowed the rest of her sentence and looked down at the charts in her hands. Kane took a step closer. Do you understand the chain of command here, Cross? Yes? Then follow it, or find another hospital. She didn't look up. Understood. Kane turned back to the residents, dismissing her as quickly as he'd attacked. Let's move. We're behind schedule. The group continued down the hall. Elena stayed where she was for a moment, waiting until her hands stopped shaking. Jess appeared beside her, voice low. You were right. Morris did adjust the protocol. Kane's just being... It's fine, Elena said quietly. It's not fine. He treats you like... It's fine. Jess hesitated, then backed off. Because that was the thing about Elena Cross. She never fought back. She never defended herself. She just absorbed the blow and kept moving. And after 3 years, most of the staff had stopped questioning it. By midday, the hospital had settled into its usual rhythm. Post-op patients recovering. Labs running behind schedule. The cafeteria serving something that claimed to be meatloaf but tasted like regret. Elena ate lunch in the break room, alone, scrolling through her phone without really seeing it. Across the room, a cluster of nurses huddled around the small TV mounted in the corner. Multiple vehicle accident on Highway 14, the news anchor was saying. Emergency crews are on scene. We're hearing reports of a military convoy involved. Elena's head snapped up. Military convoy. Highway 14 was less than 30 miles from Coldwater. One of the nurses, Rachel Booth, glanced toward Elena. You think they'll bring them here? Elena's voice came out steady. Depends on the severity. If it's bad, they'll airlift to Denver. And if it's not bad enough for airlift, then we'll get them. Rachel looked nervous. We're not exactly set up for mass trauma. No, Elena agreed. We're not. But her mind was already running through protocols, triage stations, supply inventory, blood bank status, ventilator availability. She'd done this before, not here, but somewhere else. Somewhere she didn't talk about. Rachel turned back to the TV. Hopefully it's nothing serious. Elena didn't respond, because she knew better. Nothing involving a military convoy was ever nothing serious. The call came 40 minutes later. Elena was restocking trauma bay supplies when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Attention all available medical staff. Inbound trauma alert. ETA 12 minutes. Multiple casualties. Repeat. Inbound trauma alert. The hospital transformed. Residents scrambled. Nurses abandoned their posts to prep bays. Dr. Kane appeared in the hallway, barking orders with the precision of a man who thrived on chaos as long as he controlled it. Clear beds 1 through 4. I want 2 units of O- standing by in each bay. Reyes, coordinate with the lab. Holt, call surgery and tell them we might need the OR prepped. Move. Everyone moved. Elena slipped into Trauma Bay 2 and began setting up with practiced efficiency. IV lines. Intubation kit. Suction ready. Monitors powered on and zeroed. Jess burst through the doors wide-eyed. How many are coming? Don't know yet. Do we even have enough people? Elena glanced around the bay. We'll make it work. Jess looked like she wanted to argue, but Elena's tone left no room for panic. Outside, the first siren wailed in the distance. Dr. Kane appeared in the doorway. Cross, you're on vitals only. Reyes takes lead in this bay. Clear? Elena nodded without looking at him. Clear. He moved on. Jess exhaled. Vitals only, because heaven forbid you actually do something useful. Elena didn't answer. She just finished setting up the trauma bay and stepped back to wait. The sirens grew louder, and then the doors exploded open. Mups. The first patient was a young soldier, maybe 23, maybe younger, with a leg wound that had soaked through the field dressing. 2 EMTs wheeled him in, rattling off vitals while Dr. Reyes moved into position. GSW to the left thigh, possible femoral involvement. BP 90/60, pulse 130, responsive but altered. Reyes snapped on gloves. Let's get him stabilized. Cross, start a second IV line. Elena moved without hesitation, sliding the catheter into the soldier's arm while Reyes assessed the wound. "Bleeding's controlled for now," Reyes muttered, "but if that femoral's nicked, we're going to lose him fast." The second patient arrived before the first was stabilized, then the third, then the fourth. The hospital descended into controlled chaos. Voices overlapping, alarms beeping, the metallic tang of blood mixing with antiseptic. Elena moved through it like water, smooth, efficient, anticipating needs before they were spoken. She handed instruments to Reyes before being asked. She adjusted IV drips without waiting for orders. She noticed when patient 3's oxygen saturation started dropping and had the ventilator ready before the monitor alarm even sounded. Jess watched her, eyes wide. "How are you—" "Focus on your patient," Elena said quietly. "But your Jess, focus." Jess closed her mouth and turned back to her work. Across the trauma bay, Dr. Reyes was wrestling with a collapsing blood pressure on patient 1. She reached for a vial of epinephrine, fumbled it, cursed under her breath. Elena was already handing her a second vial. Reyes took it without looking. "Thanks." 3 hours later, the immediate crisis had passed. 4 soldiers stabilized, 2 prepped for surgery, 1 discharged with minor injuries after observation. The staff staggered into the break room like survivors of a shipwreck. Elena poured herself a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt regret and leaned against the counter, letting the adrenaline drain out of her system. Dr. Reyes dropped into a chair nearby, pulling off her blood-stained gloves. "That was a nightmare." "Could have been worse," Elena said. "Could have been better if we had an actual trauma team." "We managed." Reyes looked at her, something unreadable in her expression. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. Elena sipped her coffee. "Everyone's done trauma." "Not like that." Elena didn't respond, because responding meant opening a door she'd spent 3 years keeping locked. Reyes studied her for another moment, then let it drop. "Well, thanks for the save on the epi." Elena nodded, and that should have been the end of it. But 10 minutes later, Dr. Kane appeared in the doorway. "Cross, my office, now." Kane's office was a monument to self-importance. Framed diplomas, awards from medical conferences, a photograph of him shaking hands with the governor. Elena stood in front of his desk, hands clasped, waiting. Kane didn't sit. He paced. "Dr. Reyes tells me you were effective today." Elena said nothing. "She also tells me you anticipated several interventions before she gave orders." "I was following standard trauma protocols." "Standard protocols." Kane stopped pacing. "Where exactly did you learn standard trauma protocols, Cross?" "Because your file says you worked in a small clinic in Oregon before transferring here. Not exactly a hotbed of mass casualty events." Elena kept her voice even. "I had training." "What kind of training?" "Emergency medicine." "Be specific." She met his eyes. "Does it matter? The patients are stable." Kane's expression darkened. "Yes, it matters. Because I run this hospital, and I don't like surprises. And you, Cross, are starting to look like a surprise." Elena said nothing. "You're a nurse," Kane continued. "A competent one, I'll grant you that. But competent nurses don't move through trauma bays like they've seen combat. So I'll ask again, where did you get your training?" The silence stretched. "That's what I thought," Kane said finally. "You want to keep secrets? Fine. But don't think for a second that makes you special. You follow my orders, you stay in your lane, and you don't freelance. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. Get out." Elena turned and walked out of the office, her hands steady, her expression calm. But inside, something was cracking. Because Dr. Victor Kane had just made a mistake. He'd looked at her and decided she was still nobody, still invisible, still beneath his notice. And he couldn't have been more wrong. The hospital returned to normal over the next 2 days. The soldiers were transferred to larger facilities. The trauma bays were cleaned and restocked. The staff went back to their regular routines. But something had shifted. Elena noticed it in the way Dr. Reyes watched her during rounds, in the way Jess asked her opinion on patient care, even when Kane wasn't around, in the way the younger residents started lingering near her station, asking quiet questions about trauma management, She was becoming visible, and visibility was dangerous. On the third day, Kane called another staff meeting. Elena stood at the back of the conference room, half listening to a presentation on new infection control protocols, when Kane's voice cut through the noise. "One more thing before we wrap up." The room quieted. Kane stood at the front, arms crossed. "I've been reviewing staffing allocations. We're overstaffed on the medical wing and understaffed in outpatient. Effective next week, Nurse Cross will be reassigned to the outpatient clinic." Elena's stomach dropped. Outpatient, the place where nurses went to die professionally. Routine checkups, prescription refills, nothing urgent, nothing important. It was a demotion in everything but name. Jess turned in her seat, eyes wide. "That's—" Kane's gaze snapped to her. "Something to add, Nurse Calloway?" Jess closed her mouth. Kane looked back at Elena. "Any objections, Cross?" Every eye in the room turned toward her. Elena felt the weight of it, the expectation, the opportunity. This was the moment to push back, to stand up, to fight. But fighting meant exposing herself, and exposure meant questions she couldn't answer. So she did what she'd always done. "No objections," Elena said quietly. Kane smiled. "Good. Meeting adjourned." The room emptied. Elena stayed in her seat, staring at the table in front of her. Jess lingered near the door. "Elena." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. He's punishing you for being good at your job." "It doesn't matter." "It does matter. You could report him. You could—" "I'm not reporting anyone." Jess stared at her, frustration and confusion warring on her face. "Then what are you going to do?" Elena finally looked up. "I'm going to finish my shift." And that was exactly what she did. She returned to the medical wing. She completed her charts. She restocked supplies. She moved through the hospital like a ghost. But that night, alone in her small apartment on the edge of Coldwater, Elena Cross stood in front of her bathroom mirror and let the mask slip. She looked at the woman staring back at her. Pale eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Hands that had saved lives under fire. A body that still remembered the weight of tactical gear and the sound of helicopter rotors and the smell of blood on desert sand. She opened the drawer beneath the sink, pushed aside the toiletries, and pulled out a small black case she hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside, wrapped in cloth, was a tactical armband, scorched at the edges, faded with age. The insignia still visible, ghost lead. Elena stared at it for a long time. Then she closed the case, put it back in the drawer, and locked the bathroom. Because she wasn't that person anymore. She couldn't be. Not here, not now. She'd buried Ghost Lead the day she walked away from the military, and she intended to keep her buried. The call came at 2 in the morning. Elena was 3 days into her outpatient reassignment, 3 days of blood pressure checks and routine physicals, and the suffocating boredom of medicine without stakes, when her phone lit up with the hospital's emergency line. She answered on the second ring. "Cross?" "Elena." It was Rachel, her voice tight with panic. "We need you back on the medical wing, now!" Elena was already pulling on clothes. "What happened?" "Second convoy, worse than the first. They're 10 minutes out and we don't have enough hands. Kane's calling in everyone." "I'm on my way." She made it to Ridgeway Memorial in 8 minutes. The parking lot was chaos. Military vehicles, ambulances, personnel moving with the kind of urgency that meant people were dying. Elena pushed through the emergency entrance and nearly collided with Dr. Holt. "Trauma Bay 4, he snapped. "Now!" She ran. The scene inside was worse than she'd expected. 6 patients, maybe 7. Blood everywhere, monitors screaming, staff shouting over each other. Dr. Kane stood in the center of it, directing traffic like a conductor with an orchestra that was falling apart. "Cross!" he barked when he saw her. "Bay 4, assist Reyes, move!" Elena moved. She slipped into the bay where Dr. Reyes was working on a soldier with severe chest trauma. The man's breathing was labored, his color going gray. "Tension pneumothorax," Reyes said, her voice tight. "I need to decompress, but I've never done one outside of simulation." Elena looked at the patient, at the monitor, at the way his trachea was deviating to the left. She'd seen this before, a dozen times, in places where hesitation meant death. "You need to do it now," Elena said quietly. Reyes' hands shook. Reyes, now." Reyes grabbed the needle decompression kit, positioned it, hesitated again. The patient's oxygen saturation dropped to 78. Elena's hand moved before she could stop it. She took the kit from Reyes, positioned the needle between the second and third ribs, and inserted it in one smooth motion. There was a rush of air. The patient gasped. His color started returning. The monitor stabilized. Reyes stared at her. "You just—" Elena handed back the kit. "He's stable. Finish the assessment." "Where did you learn—" "Focus on your patient, doctor." Reyes opened her mouth, closed it, turned back to the soldier. Elena stepped back, her heart pounding. That was too much, too visible. But before she could retreat, Dr. Kane's voice exploded across the trauma bay. "What the hell just happened?" Elena turned. Kane was standing in the doorway, staring at her with an expression somewhere between shock and fury. "Did you just perform a needle decompression?" Elena said nothing. "Answer me, Cross. Did you just perform a medical procedure without a physician's order?" The bay went silent. Everyone was watching. Elena met Kane's eyes. "The patient was dying. That's not your call to make. It was the right call. You're a nurse, and he's alive." Kane's face went red. "My office, as soon as this is over. We're done here." He turned and stormed out. Elena went back to work, but she knew this was the end. Kane would fire her, or force her to resign, or bury her so deep in administrative punishment that she'd have no choice but to leave. 3 years of staying invisible. 3 years of keeping her head down. Destroyed in a single moment of instinct. She finished her shift in silence, ignoring the stares, ignoring the whispers. When the last patient was stabilized and the trauma bays finally cleared, Elena walked toward Kane's office. But she never made it, because that's when the doors opened, and the dog came through. The Belgian Malinois moved like a missile. 90 pounds of muscle and military training focused on a single target. His handler, a young soldier with a blood-stained uniform, shouted commands that the dog ignored completely. Security tried to intercept. The dog dodged. Staff scattered. And then he stopped. Right in front of Elena. The corridor froze. The dog sat. His dark eyes locked on hers with unmistakable recognition. And in his mouth, held carefully between his teeth, was something Elena hadn't seen in 3 years. A tactical armband, scorched at the edges. Faded, but still legible. Ghost lead. Elena's breath caught. The handler stared. "Sir, he's never done this before. I don't—" The dog dropped the armband at Elena's feet. Then he pressed against her leg and waited. Elena looked down at the armband, at the insignia that belonged to a life she'd buried. She looked up. Every person in that corridor was staring at her. Dr. Kane pushed through the crowd. "What the hell is going on? Cross, explain this, now!" Elena's hands were shaking. The dog nudged her leg again. And somewhere deep inside, the thing she'd kept locked away for 3 years finally broke free. She reached down, picked up the armband, and looked directly at Dr. Kane. "His name is Sergeant," she said quietly. "He was my dog." Kane blinked. "Your dog?" "Yes." "You're telling me this military working dog recognizes you?" "Yes." The handler stepped forward, his voice uncertain. "Ma'am, I need to ask, were you military?" Elena didn't look away from Kane. "I was a combat medic," she said, "attached to a special operations task force. 3 deployments. 14 months in active combat zones. Ghost Lead was my call sign." The silence was absolute. Kane's face drained of color. "You were—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," Elena said. "I was." The dog leaned harder against her leg, and the woman who'd spent 3 years being invisible finally stepped into the light. Behind her, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the entire corridor erupted in applause. But Elena wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Dr. Victor Kane, at the man who'd spent 3 years treating her like she was nobody, and watching him realize exactly how wrong he'd been. The applause died slowly, fading into a silence that felt heavier than the noise that preceded it. Elena stood in the center of the corridor, the tactical armband clutched in one hand. Sergeant pressed firmly against her leg. Her pulse hammered in her ears, but her face remained calm. 3 years of practice had taught her how to keep the mask in place even when everything inside was screaming. Dr. Kane stared at her like she'd just sprouted a second head. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you've been here for 3 years. 3 years. And you never mentioned you were military. You never asked. That's not—" Kane stopped himself, visibly recalibrating. "Special operations. Combat medic. That's not something you just forget to put on a resume." "I didn't forget." "Then why?" "Because I didn't want to be found." The words came out harder than she intended. The handler, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, shifted uncomfortably. Around them, the crowd that had gathered was starting to disperse, staff returning reluctantly to their duties but glancing back over their shoulders. Kane's jaw worked. "My office. Now." Elena didn't move. "We're in the middle of a mass casualty event. The patients are stabilized. For now. Cross, well, I'm not leaving my post until every soldier in this building is cleared." Her voice didn't rise, but something in it made Kane take a step back. "After that, you can have all the meetings you want." Kane's face flushed red. For a moment, it looked like he might explode. Then Dr. Reyes appeared at his elbow, her voice low and urgent. "Dr. Kane, we've got a problem in Bay 2. Patient's pressure is dropping, and I need another set of hands." Kane glared at Elena. "This conversation isn't over." "I know." He turned and stalked toward Bay 2, Reyes trailing behind him. The handler cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I need to ask—" "Not now," Elena said quietly. She looked down at Sargent, who was still watching her with those dark, intelligent eyes. "How long has he been with you?" 8 months. I'm his 3rd handler since—" The kid paused. "Since you left, I guess." Elena's chest tightened. "He's been through 3 handlers in 3 years?" "Yes, ma'am. He's difficult. Won't bond. Won't follow commands consistently. The unit almost retired him twice." "But they didn't." "No, ma'am. He's too good when he wants to be. Best nose in the program, but he's got a stubborn streak a mile wide and nobody could figure out why." The handler looked down at Sargent, who hadn't moved from Elena's side. "I guess now we know." Elena crouched down, bringing herself eye level with the dog. Sargent's tail wagged once, twice. Then he pushed his head into her hand and made a sound that was half whine, half groan. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Ma'am." Elena stood abruptly. "What's your name?" "Corporal Bennett, ma'am. Jake Bennett." "You need to take him back to the transport area, Corporal. He shouldn't be in the hospital." Bennett hesitated. "With respect, ma'am, I don't think he's going to come with me." As if to prove the point, Sargent leaned harder against Elena's leg and showed no sign of moving. Elena sighed. "Fine. Keep him out of the trauma bays, and if anyone asks, he's emotional support for the wounded. Got it?" "Yes, ma'am." She turned to walk away, but Bennett's voice stopped her. "Ghost lead." Elena froze. "I've heard stories," Bennett continued, "about an operator who pulled 6 men out of a hot LZ under fire. About a medic who kept a team alive for 36 hours after an ambush when extraction couldn't get through. They said Ghost Lead was the kind of person you wanted beside you when everything went to hell." He paused. "They never said Ghost Lead was a woman." "They wouldn't," Elena said without turning around. "Most of the people I worked with are still classified." "What unit?" "I can't tell you that. Can't or won't." Elena finally looked back at him. "Both." She walked away before he could ask anything else. Behind her, she heard Sargent whine. The sound cut through her like a blade, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not yet. There was work to do. The next 4 hours blurred together. Elena moved through the trauma bays with mechanical precision, assisting where needed, staying out of the way when she wasn't. She checked vitals, adjusted IV drips, restocked supplies, and carefully avoided any situation that would put her in direct conflict with Kane. But she felt the shift. The other nurses watched her differently now. The residents gave her more space. Even the attending physicians who'd spent years ignoring her existence suddenly remembered her name. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, it felt like exposure. Jess cornered her in the supply room around hour 3. "You were special ops." Elena counted syringes without looking up. Combat medic attached to a task force. Not the same thing. "Close enough." Jess leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Because it wasn't relevant. Wasn't relevant? Elena, you spent 3 years letting Kane treat you like a nurse, which is what I am. You're not just a nurse, That's exactly what I am. Elena turned to face her. Whatever I was before doesn't matter. I left that behind when I left the military. Jess stared at her. Why did you leave? Elena's jaw tightened. That's not something I talk about. Not even now? Especially not now. Jess studied her for a long moment, then shook her head. You know Kane's going to come after you for this, right? He's not going to let it go. I know. So what are you going to do? Elena picked up the supply tray. My job. She pushed past Jess and headed back to the trauma wing. But Jess was right. Kane wasn't going to let this go. The confrontation came at shift change. Elena was updating charts at the nurses' station when Kane appeared, flanked by Dr. Holt and the hospital's chief nursing officer, Margaret Voss, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that could freeze water. Nurse Cross, Voss said. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were cold. We need to speak with you. Conference room, now. Elena saved the chart, logged out of the system, and followed them down the hall. The conference room was small and windowless. Kane sat at the head of the table. Voss took the seat to his right. Dr. Holt stood near the door like a bouncer. Elena remained standing. Sit, Voss said. I'm fine standing. That wasn't a request. Elena pulled out a chair and sat. Voss folded her hands on the table. Let's start with the obvious question. Why isn't your military service listed on your employment application? Because I was asked for nursing experience, which I provided. Your military service is relevant experience. I was hired as a medical surgical nurse. My job description doesn't require combat trauma experience. Kane leaned forward. You performed a needle decompression tonight without physician authorization. The patient was dying. That's not your determination to make. He had a tension pneumothorax. Dr. Reyes hesitated. I didn't. The patient lived. Elena kept her voice level. If you want to write me up for saving a life, go ahead. But that's what happened. Voss's expression didn't change. You're out of line, Nurse Cross. Am I? You violated protocol. Protocol would have killed that soldier. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Elena felt something cold and sharp rising in her chest. Because from where I'm sitting, this isn't about protocol. This is about the fact that Dr. Kane spent 3 years treating me like I was invisible, and now he's embarrassed. Kane's face went red. How dare you? I dare because it's true. Elena stood. You wanted me small. You wanted me quiet. You wanted me to follow orders and never question anything. And when I did exactly that, you decided I was worthless. But the moment I showed you what I'm actually capable of, suddenly I'm a problem. You're a liability, Kane snapped. No, I'm someone you underestimated. The room went silent. Voss cleared her throat. Nurse Cross, you need to understand the position you've put this hospital in. If word gets out that we have staff performing advanced medical procedures without proper oversight, I'm a licensed RN with wilderness medicine certification and advanced trauma life support training. Every procedure I performed tonight was within my scope of practice. That's not, check my file, it's all documented. Voss and Kane exchanged a look. We'll need to review your credentials, Voss said finally. Until then, you're suspended pending investigation. Elena's stomach dropped. Suspended? Effective immediately. You'll be paid, but you're not to report for any shifts until we've completed our review. How long will that take? As long as it takes. Elena looked at Kane. He was smiling, just slightly, just enough. She'd been outmaneuvered. Fine, Elena said quietly. Is there anything else? Voss stood. You'll receive official notification by email within 24 hours. In the meantime, collect your personal belongings and surrender your badge. Elena removed her ID badge and placed it on the table. Then she walked out. The parking lot was dark and cold. Elena's hand shook as she unlocked her car, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving her hollow. Suspended. 3 years of keeping her head down. 3 years of swallowing every insult and accepting every demotion, gone in a single night. She climbed into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady her breathing. A tap on the window made her jump. Corporal Bennett stood outside, Sergeant sitting calmly at his side. Elena rolled down the window. "What?" "I wanted to make sure you were okay, ma'am." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Elena laughed, sharp and bitter. "They suspended me." Bennett's expression darkened. "For what?" "Saving lives, apparently." "That's—" He stopped himself. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Elena didn't answer, but Bennett took it as permission to continue. "Why'd you leave? The military, I mean. People like you don't just walk away." Elena stared straight ahead through the windshield. "Yes, they do." "But why?" "Because I got tired of watching people die." The words came out flat, empty, like she'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. Bennett was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "For what it's worth, ma'am, the guys you saved tonight, they're alive because of you. Not because of that doctor. You." Elena closed her eyes. "It doesn't matter." "It does matter." "Not to them." Sergeant whined and pushed his nose against the door. Elena opened her eyes and looked down at the dog. "You need to take him back, Corporal. He can't stay with me. He won't leave." "Make him." "I can't." "Then sedate him. Crate him. I don't care. He can't—" Her voice cracked. "He can't be here." Bennett studied her. "You really think you can just walk away from this? From him?" "I already did, 3 years ago." "And how's that working out for you?" Elena didn't answer. Bennett sighed. "The unit's bivouacked about 10 miles north of here. We'll be here another 48 hours for the wounded to stabilize before transport. If you change your mind—" "I won't." "The offer stands." He turned and walked back toward the hospital, Sergeant following reluctantly after one last look at Elena's car. Elena watched them go. Then she started the engine and drove home. Her apartment was exactly how she'd left it that morning. Small, sparse, the kind of place where someone lived but didn't actually have a life. Elena dropped her keys on the counter and stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. Suspended. The word echoed in her head like a death sentence. She should have known better, should have kept her head down, should have let that soldier die rather than expose herself. The thought made her sick. She walked to the bathroom, opened the drawer, and pulled out the black case. The armband was still inside, exactly where she'd left it. Ghost Lead. A name that used to mean something. Now it was just a reminder of everything she'd lost. Elena sat on the bathroom floor and let herself cry for the first time in 3 years. The email arrived at 6 the next morning. Elena hadn't slept. She'd spent the night sitting on her couch, staring at her phone, waiting for something she couldn't name. The subject line read, "Personnel Review Notification." She opened it with numb fingers. The message was professionally worded and devastatingly clear. Pending investigation into protocol violations and undisclosed employment history, Nurse Elena Cross was suspended without privileges for a minimum of 2 weeks. A formal review board would convene to determine appropriate disciplinary action up to and including termination. She read it twice. Then she threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen intact but her restraint shattered. 3 years. 3 years of being small. 3 years of swallowing humiliation. And this was her reward. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral. Elena opened it to find Jess standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking thoroughly exhausted. "I heard," Jess said, "news travels fast. Kane sent out a staff memo, said you were suspended pending investigation for unauthorized medical intervention." Jess pushed past her into the apartment. "Which is bullshit, by the way." Elena closed the door. "Is it? You saved that guy's life." "I also violated chain of command." "So did everyone else in that trauma bay. Why aren't they suspended?" Elena took one of the coffee cups but didn't drink. "Because they're not a threat to Kane's ego." Jess sat on the couch. "You could fight this. File a grievance. Get a union rep. Hell, get a lawyer." "And say what? That I'm being punished for being competent?" "Yes, exactly that." Elena shook her head. "It won't matter. Kane runs this hospital. Voss backs him. I'm one nurse. Who do you think wins that fight?" "So you're just going to give up?" "I'm being realistic. Jess set down her coffee and stood. This isn't you. You don't know me. I know you spent 3 years taking abuse from Kane without saying a word. I know you worked doubles when we were short-staffed. I know you caught mistakes that would have killed patients. And I know that last night you saved a soldier's life while everyone else was too scared or too stupid to act. Jess crossed her arms. So yeah, maybe I don't know everything about you, but I know you're not a quitter. Elena met her eyes. I quit the military. That's different. Is it? The silence stretched between them. Finally, Jess picked up her coffee. The staff's talking. About you. About what happened. Kane thinks he's got control of the narrative, but he's wrong. People saw what you did. They're not going to forget. It doesn't matter what they remember. It might. Jess left without another word. Elena stood alone in her apartment, holding cold coffee and wondering how her life had collapsed so completely in less than 12 hours. The second knock came that afternoon. Elena almost didn't answer. She was 3 hours into a Netflix binge she wasn't actually watching, still in the same clothes from the night before, and not in the mood for company, but the knocking persisted. She opened the door. Corporal Bennett stood there, looking uncomfortable. Beside him sat Sergeant, tail wagging. Ma'am, Elena sighed. What do you want? Permission to speak freely? You're not in my chain of command, Corporal. Say whatever you want. Bennett shifted his weight. The unit heard about your suspension. Word is you're being railroaded. Word travels fast. Military bases and hospitals are basically the same. Everyone knows everyone's business. He paused. My CO wants to meet with you. Elena's stomach tightened. Why? Because what happened last night wasn't just some random coincidence. Sergeant didn't break loose on accident. He tracked you. Through a hospital full of people and blood and chaos, he found you. Bennett looked down at the dog. And my CO wants to know why. Tell your CO I'm not interested. Ma'am, I left that world behind. I'm not going back. Nobody's asking you to go back. We just want to talk. No. 5 minutes, that's all. I said no. Bennett didn't move. The CO said if you refused, I should tell you that Private First Class Derek Morrison sends his regards. Elena froze. Derek Morrison. The name hit her like a punch to the chest. She'd pulled Morrison out of a burning vehicle in Kandahar, carried him 200 meters under enemy fire, kept him alive long enough for medevac to arrive. That was 6 years ago. How is he? The question came out before she could stop it. Alive, married, 2 kids. Bennett's expression softened. He says he owes you everything. Elena's throat tightened. 5 minutes, Bennett repeated. That's all? She looked at Sergeant, who was watching her with those dark, knowing eyes. Fine, she said finally. 5 minutes. The military bivouac was exactly what she expected. Temporary structures, transport vehicles, armed personnel moving with efficient purpose. Bennett led her to a command tent where a woman in her 40s sat reviewing paperwork. Sharp features, graying hair pulled back, the kind of presence that commanded respect without demanding it. She looked up when Elena entered. Nurse Cross, thank you for coming. She stood and extended a hand. Major Sarah Whitmore, I'm the commanding officer for this unit. Elena shook her hand. Corporal Bennett said you wanted to talk. I did. Whitmore gestured to a chair. Please. Elena sat. Sergeant immediately pressed against her leg. Whitmore noticed. He hasn't done that with anyone since you left the service. Corporal Bennett mentioned he's been difficult. Difficult is an understatement. 3 handlers, multiple disciplinary incidents. We almost retired him twice. Whitmore leaned back. But now I understand why. He's been waiting for you. Elena's chest tightened. I didn't ask him to wait. Dogs don't care what we ask. They care about loyalty, and he's loyal to you. That's not my problem, isn't it? Whitmore's gaze was steady. You saved 6 men last night. You performed under pressure that would have broken most people. And you did it while being actively undermined by your own chain of command. She paused. That takes a special kind of strength. Elena said nothing. I pulled your file, Whitmore continued. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. 3 deployments, 14 months in combat zones, 2 Bronze Stars, a commendation medal, and a medical discharge that's sealed tighter than classified intel. She leaned forward. What happened? Elena stood. I need to go. Sit down. The command was quiet but absolute. Elena sat. Whitmore's expression softened slightly. I'm not your enemy, Cross. I'm trying to understand why someone with your skill set is working in a rural hospital where the chief physician treats her like she's disposable. Because I wanted to disappear. From what? Elena looked at Sargent, at the dog who'd waited 3 years for her to come back. From the person I used to be, she said finally. Whitmore was quiet for a moment. Then she said, How's that working out? Elena laughed, bitter and sharp. I'm suspended, probably about to be fired, and my entire life just imploded in front of a hospital full of people. She met Whitmore's eyes. So, not great. Good. Elena blinked. Good? You spent 3 years trying to be someone you're not. Maybe it's time to stop running. I'm not running. Then what do you call it? Elena didn't answer. Whitmore stood. I have a proposition for you. The military's developing a new civilian military medical liaison program. Embedded trauma specialist who can work in rural hospitals and provide support during mass casualty events. We need someone with your background, someone who understands both worlds. I'm not coming back. It's a civilian position. You'd keep your nursing license. You'd work at Ridgeway Memorial, or wherever you choose. But when we need you, you'd be available. Training, consultation, emergency response. Elena shook her head. Why would I go back to a hospital that just suspended me? Because I'm going to make sure that suspension disappears. Whitmore's smile was sharp. I have friends in interesting places, and I don't appreciate watching qualified personnel get buried by incompetent administrators. You can't just watch me. Elena stared at her. Why do you care? Because people like you are rare. And wasting talent like yours because some doctor has an ego problem? Whitmore's expression hardened. That's unacceptable. What if I say no? Then you say no. But you should know the men you saved last night. They're talking, and their families are talking. And by tomorrow morning, every major news outlet in Wyoming is going to know that a decorated combat medic was suspended for saving lives. Whitmore leaned back. So whether you take my offer or not, your quiet life is over. Elena's blood ran cold. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you options. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Whitmore shrugged. Think about it. You have 48 hours before we ship out. Elena stood. Is that all? One more thing. Whitmore nodded toward Sargent. He's yours if you want him. His current handler agrees he'd be better off with you. Elena looked down at the dog. Sargent looked back, tail wagging slowly. I can't. 48 hours, Whitmore repeated. Think about it. Elena turned and walked out of the tent before she could say something she'd regret. Behind her, she heard Sargent whine, but she didn't look back. Ubistek. The parking lot of her apartment complex was dark when she returned. Elena sat in her car, engine running, trying to process everything that had just happened. Whitmore's offer, the news coverage, Sargent, all of it felt like a trap closing around her. She pulled out her phone and opened her email. 3 new messages. The first was from Jess. Call me. Important. The second was from an unknown number. This is Dr. Angela Reyes. We need to talk about what happened. Please call me. The third made her breath stop. The subject line read, Formal Complaint. She opened it. It was from Dr. Victor Kane. A formal complaint filed against Elena Cross for insubordination, unauthorized medical intervention, falsification of employment records, and conduct unbecoming of a medical professional. Recommended action, immediate termination. Elena read it 3 times. Then she turned off her phone, got out of the car, and walked into her apartment. She made it to the bathroom before she started shaking. The black case was still sitting on the counter. She opened it and pulled out the armband. Ghost Lead. The name that used to mean something. The person she used to be. Strong, capable, fearless. Elena looked at herself in the mirror, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself ask the question she'd been avoiding. What if she stopped running? What if she stopped trying to be small? What if she let Ghost Lead come back? The thought terrified her, but staying invisible terrified her more. She picked up her phone and turned it back on, scrolled to Jess's message, typed out a response. What's important? The reply came 30 seconds later. The staff's organizing. We're filing a counter-complaint against Kane. We need your testimony. Elena stared at the screen. Then she typed, I'm in. She hit send before she could change her mind. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and Elena Cross stood in her bathroom, holding a tactical armband and a phone, and felt something inside her shift. The woman who'd spent 3 years disappearing was done hiding. Whatever happened next, she wasn't going to face it quietly. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Dr. Victor Kane wasn't finished either. And the next move he made would force Elena to choose between the life she'd tried to build and the person she'd sworn never to be again. The meeting happened in Jess's apartment because nowhere at Ridgeway Memorial was safe. Elena arrived at 7 the next morning to find 8 people already crammed into the small living room. Nurses mostly, but also 2 residents and a lab technician whose name she couldn't remember. They all looked up when she walked in, and the conversation died. Jess stood. Everyone, this is Elena. We know who she is, said one of the older nurses. Patricia Kern, 20 years at Ridgeway, and a face that had seen too many budget cuts. Question is whether she knows what she's walking into. Elena closed the door behind her. Jess said you're filing a complaint against Kane. Not just a complaint. Patricia pulled out a thick folder and dropped it on the coffee table. Documentation. 3 years of incident reports, witness statements, and HR violations that got buried because Kane has the board in his pocket. Elena picked up the folder. Inside were dozens of pages. Complaints about intimidation, reports of nurses being overruled on patient care, instances of residents being berated until they broke down. Some of the names she recognized. Most she didn't. How long have you been collecting this? She asked. Since Kane became chief of medicine, Patricia said. 6 years. Why didn't anyone file before? Because people need their jobs. Patricia's voice was sharp. You think anyone wants to go up against the man who controls their paycheck, who writes their evaluations, who can blacklist them from every hospital in the state? Elena set down the folder. So why now? Because you gave us an opening. Dr. Reyes spoke from the corner of the room, arms crossed. What happened 2 nights ago? Everyone saw it. The staff saw you save that soldier. They saw Kane try to bury you for it. And people are angry. Angry doesn't win fights, Elena said. No, but evidence does. Patricia tapped the folder. And we've got 6 years of it. The problem is we need someone Kane can't dismiss. Someone with credibility. Someone who can stand in front of a review board and make them listen. Elena looked around the room. You want me to testify. We want you to lead, Jess said quietly. The words hung in the air. Elena shook her head. I'm suspended. I'm facing termination. I'm the worst possible choice. You're the only choice, Patricia countered. Everyone else is too scared or too compromised. But you? You've got nothing left to lose. And more importantly, you've got a service record that makes Kane look like a medical student. My service record is sealed. Not anymore. Dr. Reyes pulled out her phone and held it up. The screen showed a news article from the Coldwater Tribune. The headline read, Decorated Combat Medic Suspended for Saving Lives. Elena's stomach dropped. How did they... Someone leaked it. Probably one of the soldiers from the convoy. Reyes scrolled down. There's already 3 articles, 2 interview requests, and a state senator asking questions about Ridgeway's employment practices. Whitmore, Elena said quietly. What? Nothing. Elena took the phone and read the article. It was detailed, too detailed. Her deployments, her call sign, the Bronze Stars, everything she'd spent 3 years keeping hidden. This is going to get worse, she said. Good, Patricia replied. Let it get worse. Let people see what Kane did. Let them see how this hospital treats the people who actually save lives. Elena handed back the phone. What exactly do you want from me? Tomorrow morning, there's an emergency board meeting, Jess said. Kane's pushing for your immediate termination. But if we present our complaint first, if we show the board that Kane's been violating hospital policy for years, we can force a real investigation. And you think they'll listen? They'll have to. The media's already involved. If they sweep this under the rug now, it becomes a PR nightmare. Elena looked at the folder on the table, at the evidence Patricia had spent 6 years collecting, At the people in this room who were risking their careers on the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would finally hold Kane accountable. She thought about Sargent waiting at the bivouac, about Whitmore's offer, about the armband sitting in her bathroom, about the person she used to be. "What time's the meeting?" she asked. Patricia smiled. 8:30, sharp. Neck. Elena spent the rest of the day preparing. She reviewed every incident report in Patricia's folder, read through witness statements, cross-referenced dates with her own shifts, and realized she'd been present for at least a dozen of the documented violations. By midnight, she had a timeline. By 2 a.m., she had talking points. By 4, she'd given up on sleep entirely and was sitting at her kitchen table, drinking coffee that tasted like battery acid and trying not to think about how badly this could go. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Corporal Bennett standing in the hallway, looking exhausted. "It's 4 in the morning, Elena said. "I know. Can I come in?" She stepped aside. Bennett entered, glanced around the sparse apartment, and turned to face her. "The CO sent me." "Of course she did. She wanted you to know that whatever happens at that board meeting, you've got support. Official support. The kind that comes with lawyers and press releases." Elena crossed her arms. "Why does Whitmore care this much?" Bennett hesitated. "Permission to speak off the record?" "Go ahead." Her sister was a Navy corpsman, got buried by her chain of command after she reported a senior officer for negligence. Ended up resigning rather than fight it. Bennett's expression was grim. She died 6 months later. Suicide. Elena's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. Whitmore's not going to let it happen again. Not if she can help it." Bennett pulled an envelope from his jacket. "She wanted me to give you this." Elena took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a business card for a law firm in Cheyenne and a handwritten note. "Call them. They're expecting you. SW." "I don't need a lawyer," Elena said. "Everyone needs a lawyer when they're going up against people with power. I can handle Kane." "Can you handle the hospital board, the HR department, the insurance company that's going to claim you're a liability?" Bennett's voice was flat. "This isn't a fight you can win alone, ma'am. I've seen people try. They lose." Elena set the card on the counter. "Tell Whitmore thank you, but I've got this." Bennett looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just nodded. "Good luck tomorrow." "Yeah." He left. Elena stared at the business card for a long time. Then she threw it in the trash. The Ridgeway Memorial Administrative Building was a separate structure from the main hospital. A 2-story brick building that housed HR, billing, and the executive offices. Elena had been inside exactly twice in 3 years, both times to sign paperwork. She arrived at 8:20 wearing the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks and a white blouse that had been in the back of her closet since her interview. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone who'd stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. Patricia met her in the parking lot, along with Jess, Dr. Reyes, and 4 other staff members who'd agreed to testify. "You ready?" Patricia asked. Elena looked at the building, at the windows of the second-floor conference room where her professional life was about to be decided. "No," she said, "but let's do it anyway." They walked in together. The conference room was bigger than Elena expected. A long table with 20 chairs, windows overlooking the parking lot, and a projector screen that nobody was using. 5 board members sat on one side of the table. Dr. Kane sat at the head, Margaret Voss beside him. A man Elena didn't recognize, late 50s, expensive suit, sat near the far end with a briefcase. "Hospital counsel," Patricia whispered. "This is going to be ugly." The board chair, Richard Holbrook, a retired banker with more money than medical knowledge, looked up when they entered. "Nurse Cross, you're early." "So are we all," Patricia said, moving forward. "And we're here to present evidence of systematic misconduct by Dr. Victor Kane that's been ongoing for 6 years. Holbrook blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Patricia dropped her folder on the table. "Documented evidence, witness testimony, HR complaints that were filed and ignored. We're requesting a full investigation into Dr. Kane's conduct and a stay on Nurse Cross's termination until that investigation is complete." Kane's face went red. "This is inappropriate." What's inappropriate is threatening to fire someone for saving a patient's life, Dr. Reyes cut in. What's inappropriate is creating a hostile work environment where nurses are too scared to speak up. What's inappropriate is 6 years of bullying and intimidation that this board has allowed to continue unchecked. The room erupted, board members talking over each other, Kane shouting about insubordination, Voss trying to restore order, the hospital council flipping through papers with increasing alarm. Holbrook slammed his hand on the table. Everyone stop, now! Silence fell. Holbrook looked at Patricia. You're saying Dr. Kane has been violating hospital policy. I'm saying Dr. Kane has created a pattern of abuse that's documented across dozens of incidents and multiple witnesses. And you're bringing this up now because now someone's finally paying attention. Holbrook turned to Kane. Is any of this true? Kane's voice was ice. This is a coordinated effort to undermine my authority by staff who refuse to follow proper protocol. Nurse Cross violated direct orders, performed procedures without authorization, and lied on her employment application about her background. Everything I've done has been to maintain professional standards. You called me incompetent in front of patients, one of the nurses interrupted. Sarah Mitchell, one of the younger staff members who'd been too scared to speak up until now. You told me I was too stupid to be a nurse. You made me cry in a supply closet and then wrote me up for taking too long on my break. Kane stared at her. That's a gross mischaracterization. I've got the write-up, Sarah said, pulling paper from her bag. Dated, signed by you, and witnessed by 3 other people. Another nurse stood. He threatened to fire me when I questioned a medication order that was wrong. The patient almost died because I was too scared to push back. He called me hysterical when I reported a safety concern, someone else added. He told a resident that women don't belong in surgery. He buried my complaint about inadequate staffing levels. The testimonies came faster than Kane could respond. Staff member after staff member standing up and finally, after years of silence, saying what they'd been too afraid to say. Elena watched Kane's face change, watched the confidence drain away. Watched him realize he was losing control of the narrative. Holbrook raised a hand. Enough. We'll review all of this, but right now we need to address the immediate issue. Dr. Kane, you've filed for Nurse Cross's termination. What's your justification? She performed a medical procedure without physician authorization. She saved a man's life, Elena said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She'd been silent until now, letting the others speak. But Kane's words, the sheer arrogance of them, finally broke through her restraint. That soldier had a tension pneumothorax, Elena continued, her voice level. Dr. Reyes identified it, but hesitated on the decompression because she'd never performed one outside simulation. I have performed them, multiple times, under worse conditions than a sterile trauma bay. She looked directly at Kane. So I did what needed to be done, and he lived. That's not your decision to make, Kane snapped. Then whose decision is it? Yours? Because you weren't in the room. You were 3 bays over dealing with a different patient. By the time you could have been notified, that soldier would have been dead. You don't have the authority. I have the training, I have the experience, and I have a license that says I'm allowed to perform emergency interventions to preserve life. Elena's voice hardened. What I don't have is the patience to watch people die because you're more concerned with hierarchy than outcomes. Kane stood. You are out of line. No, you're out of line. You've been out of line for 6 years, and everyone in this building knows it. The room went silent. Holbrook cleared his throat. I think we need to recess. The board will review all presented materials and reconvene at 2 p.m. with a decision. That's unacceptable, Kane said. I want this resolved now. You'll get your resolution when we've had time to properly assess the situation. Holbrook stood. This meeting is adjourned. Matt. The next 4 hours were the longest of Elena's life. The group relocated to a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. Nobody ate, nobody talked much. They just sat and waited, checking phones and watching the clock. At 1:15, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the news. Bennett. She pulled up the Coldwater Tribune website. The headline made her stomach drop. Ridgeway Memorial Board meeting disrupted by staff revolt. Below it was a photo. Someone had taken a picture through the conference room windows of Elena standing in front of Kane, both of them frozen in mid-argument. The article had quotes from anonymous sources, details about the complaint, references to Kane's history, and at the bottom, a statement from Major Sarah Whitmore expressing concern about how military veterans were being treated in civilian medical facilities. "She went nuclear," Patricia said, reading over Elena's shoulder. "This is going to force the board's hand," Dr. Reyes added. "They can't sweep this under the rug now." Elena set down her phone. "Or it gives them cover to fire everyone involved." "They won't fire all of us. There aren't enough nurses in Wyoming to replace us." "You don't know that." "No, but I know they're scared, and scared people make mistakes." At 2 p.m., they walked back to the administrative building. The board was already seated. Kane sat rigid in his chair, expression carved from stone. Voss looked exhausted. The hospital counsel was whispering urgently to Holbrook. Holbrook waited until everyone was seated before speaking. "The board has reviewed the materials presented this morning. We've also consulted with legal counsel regarding the allegations against Dr. Kane and the suspension of Nurse Cross." He paused. "This is a complicated situation with significant implications for the hospital." "Just tell us," Patricia said. Holbrook's jaw tightened. "The board is ordering a full third-party investigation into workplace conduct at Ridgeway Memorial. Dr. Kane will remain in his position during this investigation, but his administrative authority will be limited and overseen by an interim supervisor appointed by the board." Kane's face went white. "As for Nurse Cross," Holbrook turned to Elena, "your suspension is lifted effective immediately. However, you will be reassigned to work directly with the investigation team to ensure full cooperation from medical staff." Elena blinked. "I'm not fired?" "You're not fired." "But she violated protocol," Kane said, his voice strangled. She saved a life using training and experience that's now been verified by military sources," Holbrook interrupted. "And frankly, Dr. Kane, the optics of firing a decorated combat veteran for competent medical intervention are worse than you seem to realize." The room was silent. "This meeting is adjourned," Holbrook said. "The investigation will begin Monday. Everyone will cooperate fully. That's not a request." The board filed out. Kane stood slowly, looked at Elena, and walked past without a word. But his expression said everything. This wasn't over. The celebration happened in the hospital parking lot because nobody wanted to go back inside yet. Jess was crying. Patricia was smiling for the first time in what looked like years. Dr. Reyes kept saying "holy shit" over and over like a mantra. Elena stood apart from the group, trying to process what had just happened. She wasn't fired. Kane was being investigated. The system, against all odds, had actually worked. But the victory felt hollow, because she knew Kane. Knew men like him. They didn't just accept defeat, they regrouped. They strategized. They came back harder. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "You did good. Now finish it." SW. Elena stared at the message. Finish it. The investigation would take weeks, maybe months, and during that time, Kane would be looking for any opening to turn this around. She needed insurance. She needed leverage. She needed... Her phone rang. The hospital's main number. "Cross. Elena, it's Rachel from the ER. We've got incoming. Mass casualty. Chemical exposure at the plant north of town. ETA, 7 minutes. All available staff report immediately." Elena's blood went cold. "How many?" "At least 15. Maybe more. It's bad." The line went dead. Elena looked at the group. "We've got incoming. Chemical exposure. Everyone who's not suspended needs to move now." The celebration died instantly. They ran for the hospital entrance. Elena was 3 steps behind when someone grabbed her arm. She spun to find Kane standing there, his grip tight enough to hurt. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You think you've won? You've just made this worse for yourself." Elena jerked her arm free. "Let go of me. You're going to regret this. All of it. I regret 3 years of letting you get away with it. That's what I regret." Kane's eyes were cold. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "Yeah," Elena said. "I do. You're a bully who finally got called on it, and you're terrified." She turned and ran for the ER. Behind her, Kane stood in the parking lot watching her go. And in that moment, something shifted in his expression. Something calculating. Something dangerous. The ER was chaos. 15 patients, all showing signs of chemical burns and respiratory distress. The plant had been manufacturing industrial cleaners when a storage tank ruptured, releasing chlorine gas. Elena hit the door and immediately started triaging. Red tags for the worst cases, yellow for serious but stable, green for minor injuries. She moved fast, assessing airways, checking vitals, prioritizing based on severity. Dr. Reyes appeared at her elbow. "What do you need?" "Oxygen on everyone. Bronchodilators for the severe respiratory cases. Decontamination shower running continuously. And someone needs to call poison control for specific treatment protocols." "On it." The next hour blurred. Elena moved between patients, managing airways, starting IVs, coordinating with residents who were barely holding it together. One patient crashed, respiratory failure from chlorine damage. Elena intubated while Dr. Reyes managed the ventilator. The patient stabilized. Another patient started seizing, chemical-induced hypocalcemia. Elena pushed calcium gluconate while Jess monitored the EKG. The seizures stopped. By hour 2, the worst was over. All 15 patients alive, most stable, 3 being prepped for transfer to a burn center in Denver. Elena stood in the hallway outside the ER, scrubs soaked with sweat and chemicals, and finally let herself breathe. Dr. Reyes joined her. "That was incredible." "That was luck." "No, that was you." Reyes looked at her. "Kane couldn't have done what you just did. Kane wasn't here." "Exactly." Elena frowned. "Where is he?" Reyes hesitated. "I don't know. He was supposed to report when the call came through, but nobody's seen him." A cold feeling settled in Elena's stomach. She pulled out her phone and called the charge nurse. "Where's Dr. Kane?" "I don't know. He's not answering pages." "Check his office." 5 minutes later, the charge nurse called back. "He's not here, and his office is locked." Elena hung up and looked at Reyes. "Something's wrong." "Maybe he just went home." "No, he wouldn't leave during a mass casualty event, not without telling someone." "Then where is he?" Elena's mind raced. Kane was smart, vindictive, and he'd just lost control of the hospital he'd ruled for 6 years. Men like that didn't just disappear, they planned. "I need to see his office," Elena said. "It's locked." "I don't care. Get maintenance to open it." Reyes stared at her. "Why?" "Because if Kane's planning something, we need to know what it is before he does it." 10 minutes later, they stood in Kane's office. It looked normal. Diplomas on the wall, awards, the governor photo. But his computer was missing. Elena checked the desk drawers. Empty. The file cabinets. Empty. Even his personal items, the framed photos, the coffee mug, were gone. "He cleaned out," Reyes said slowly. Elena's stomach dropped. "He ran. Why would he?" "Because he knows what's coming. The investigation is going to find everything. And when it does, he's not just losing his job. He's losing his license, maybe facing criminal charges." Elena turned to Reyes. "We need to call the board. Now." They called Holbrook from the nurses' station. "Dr. Kane has left the building," Elena said. "His office is cleared out. I think he's gone." Holbrook was silent for a moment. "Stay where you are. I'm calling the police." The line went dead. Elena set down the phone and looked at Reyes. "This just got worse," she said quietly. "How much worse?" Before Elena could answer, the ER doors burst open. Corporal Bennett stumbled through, supporting another soldier who was bleeding from a head wound. "We need help," Bennett gasped. "We were ambushed at the bivouac. Someone—" He looked up, and his eyes locked on Elena. "Someone attacked us, and they took Sergeant." Elena's world stopped. "What?" "Sergeant's gone. Someone tranquilized him and took him, and they left a message." Bennett pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Elena opened it with shaking hands. The message was typed. No signature, just 3 words. "You took everything." Elena stared at the paper and knew with absolute certainty exactly who'd written it. Kane hadn't run. He'd declared war. Elena's hands crushed the paper. The ER noise faded to white static. The fluorescent lights overhead felt too bright, too sharp. She could hear her own heartbeat hammering against her ribs. Bennett was still talking, explaining the attack, But the words didn't register. All Elena could see was that message. You took everything. She looked up at Bennett. When did this happen? 20 minutes ago, maybe less. We were rotating watch when someone came through the perimeter. Military-grade tranquilizer dart. Hit Sergeant before we could react. Bennett's face was tight with anger. By the time we got there, the dog was gone, and this was taped to his crate. Dr. Reyes moved closer, her voice low. You think Kane did this? I know he did. That's insane. Why would he? Because he's losing everything, and he wants me to feel what that's like. Elena's voice was flat, cold. He took the one thing he knew would get to me. We need to call the police, Reyes said. They're already coming. Holbrook called them about Kane disappearing. Elena turned to Bennett. Did you see which direction they went? North, toward the service road, but we lost the trail in the dark. Elena pulled out her phone and dialed Whitmore. The major answered on the first ring. I heard, Whitmore said before Elena could speak. Bennett radioed it in. I've got 2 teams sweeping the area, but so far nothing. Kane has him. You're sure? Yes. Then we'll find him, and when we do, no. Elena's voice cut through the line. When you find him, you call me first. Nobody moves until I get there. Whitmore was silent for a moment. Elena, I mean it. Sergeant knows me. If he's scared or drugged, he might attack anyone who approaches. I need to be there. Another pause, then, fine. But if this goes sideways, it won't. Elena hung up and looked at Bennett. Get that head wound checked. Then meet me in the parking lot in 10 minutes. You're coming with me. Ma'am, I should be with my unit. Your unit is doing a grid search. You know Kane's face. I need you with me. Bennett hesitated, then nodded. Elena turned to Reyes. The chemical exposure patients, are they stable? For now, but we're short-staffed. Call in the night shift early. Tell them it's an emergency. Elena was already moving toward the exit. And if anyone asks where I am, you haven't seen me. Elena, wait. But she was already gone. Spot. The parking lot was dark and empty except for a handful of staff vehicles. Elena leaned against her car, trying to think like Kane. He was smart, vindictive, but also desperate. Desperate people made mistakes. She pulled up a map on her phone and started marking locations. Kane's house, 12 miles west. His cabin. He'd mentioned it once during a staff meeting somewhere in the mountains north of Coldwater. The hospital administrative building. The plant where the chemical accident happened. None of them felt right. Kane wouldn't go home. Too obvious. The cabin was possible, but remote locations meant limited escape routes if things went wrong. He needed somewhere close, somewhere he could control, somewhere that... Elena's breath caught. The old medical building. Ridgeway Memorial had expanded 15 years ago, constructing the new hospital facility and abandoning the original structure half a mile down the road. The old building was scheduled for demolition, but the project kept getting delayed due to budget issues. It sat empty, boarded up, forgotten by everyone except the administrative staff, who occasionally used it for storage. Kane would know about it. Kane would have access. And it was close enough to the bivouac that someone could grab a dog and disappear in minutes. Bennett appeared, a fresh bandage on his temple. Where are we going? Old medical building, quarter-mile past the gas station on Route 9. You sure? No, but it's the best guess I've got. They climbed into Elena's car. She drove fast, pushing the speed limit, her mind racing through possibilities. If Kane had Sergeant, what was his endgame? Leverage? He had to know taking a military working dog was a felony. Revenge? Possible. But Kane wasn't stupid enough to throw away his entire life just to hurt her, unless he thought he had nothing left to lose. The old medical building appeared in the headlights, a 2-story concrete structure with boarded windows and a chain-link fence. Elena killed the lights and pulled into the empty lot. We should wait for backup, Bennett said. We will, but I need to confirm he's here first. She got out of the car and approached the fence. The gate was closed, but not locked. Fresh tire tracks led through the mud toward the rear entrance. Elena's pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone and texted Whitmore. Old Hospital, Route 9, send backup, but stay silent. Will confirm. The reply came instantly. En route. Don't do anything stupid. Elena pocketed her phone and looked at Bennett. Stay here. If you hear anything, gunshots, screaming, anything, call Whitmore immediately and get inside. Ma'am, I should come with... You've got a head injury and no weapon. Stay here. Bennett looked like he wanted to argue but knew better. He nodded. Elena slipped through the gate. The building loomed ahead, dark and silent. She moved along the perimeter, checking windows, looking for signs of entry. The rear door was open. She stopped, listening. Inside, she heard something, faint, rhythmic, pacing. Elena pulled the door open slowly and stepped into darkness. The interior smelled like mold and decay. Her eyes adjusted gradually, picking out shapes. Overturned gurneys, stacks of old files, medical equipment from another era. And then she heard it. A whine. Sergeant. Elena followed the sound down a corridor, moving carefully, her footsteps silent on the cracked linoleum. The whining grew louder. She reached a door marked storage and pushed it open. Inside, lit by a single battery-powered lantern, was Sergeant. The dog was crated, awake but groggy from the tranquilizer. When he saw Elena, his tail thumped weakly against the metal bars. Elena moved forward, and something cold pressed against the back of her neck. Stop, Kane's voice. Elena froze. I knew you'd come, Kane said quietly. You're predictable, Cross. Always have been. Let the dog go. No, this is over, Kane. The board knows you ran. The police are looking for you. Taking a military dog just made it worse. Worse? Kane laughed, sharp and bitter. It can't get worse. You destroyed everything. My career, my reputation. 6 years of work, gone because you couldn't follow orders. Elena's jaw tightened. You destroyed yourself. I built this hospital. I made it run. And everyone just accepted that I was the problem? The pressure against her neck increased. You turned them against me. I just showed them who you really are. You made me a villain. You did that on your own. Kane was silent for a moment. Then he said, Walk forward, slowly. Elena moved toward the crate. Sergeant watched her, his dark eyes tracking every movement. Open it, Kane ordered. Why? Because I want to see what happens when he comes out. Whether he attacks me. Whether he protects you. Kane's voice was cold. I want to watch you choose. Elena's blood ran cold. Choose what? The dog or your safety? You open that crate, he might attack me. And if he does, I'll shoot him. But if you don't open it, if you refuse, then I know you're not the hero everyone thinks you are. You're just someone who saves people when it's convenient. Elena's hands shook. You're insane. I'm practical. Now open the crate. She looked at Sergeant. The dog was staring at Kane now, lips pulled back slightly, a low growl building in his chest. He's going to attack you, Elena said quietly. Then he'll die, and it'll be your fault. No, it'll be yours. Open the crate. Elena reached for the latch, and the door behind them exploded inward. Whitmore burst through with 4 soldiers, weapons drawn. Drop it! Kane spun, the gun still pressed to Elena's neck. Stay back! Whitmore didn't move. Lower the weapon, Dr. Kane. This doesn't end the way you think it does. You don't know what you're talking about. I know you assaulted a military installation. I know you stole a working dog, and I know you're currently holding a weapon to a civilian's head. Whitmore's voice was ice. Those are federal charges, multiple felonies. You're done. Kane's hand shook. She ruined me. No, you ruined yourself. I'm not going to prison. Then drop the gun. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Kane's arm wavered. The gun lowered slightly, and Elena struck. She spun inside Kane's guard, grabbed his wrist, and twisted hard. The gun clattered to the floor. Kane stumbled backward, and Whitmore's soldiers moved in, pinning him to the ground in seconds. Elena staggered away, breathing hard. Whitmore approached, holstering her weapon. You good? Yeah. That was stupid. Probably. Whitmore looked at Kane being cuffed on the floor. He's going away for a long time. Elena moved to Sergeant's crate and opened it. The dog pushed out, still unsteady, and pressed against her legs. She knelt and wrapped her arms around him. You're okay, she whispered. You're okay. Sergeant licked her face. Behind them, soldiers were hauling Kane to his feet. He looked at Elena, his expression twisted with rage and something else. Defeat. "This isn't over," he spat. Elena stood slowly. "Yes, it is." They dragged him out. The police arrived 15 minutes later, followed by the state patrol, followed by enough emergency vehicles to light up the entire road. Elena gave her statement 3 times. Bennett gave his. Whitmore coordinated with local law enforcement while her team secured the scene. By the time Elena finally walked out of the building, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Dr. Reyes was waiting in the parking lot, along with Jess, Patricia, and half the nursing staff from Ridgeway Memorial. "We heard," Reyes said. "Are you okay?" Elena looked at them, at the people who'd stood with her, who'd risked their careers because they believed something better was possible. "I'm fine," she said. "Kane's in custody," Jess added, "and the board's called an emergency session. They want to talk to you." Elena's stomach tightened. "When?" "This afternoon." "What do they want?" Reyes smiled slightly. "I think they want to apologize." The board meeting happened at 3 p.m. Elena sat across from Richard Holbrook and the other board members, Sargent lying quietly at her feet. The hospital's legal counsel was there. So was a representative from the state medical board. And so was Margaret Voss, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Holbrook cleared his throat. "Nurse Cross, first, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. What happened to you, what Dr. Kane did, should never have occurred. We failed in our oversight. We failed our staff, and we failed you." Elena said nothing. Holbrook continued. "Dr. Kane has been terminated effective immediately. His medical license is under review by the state board. Criminal charges are pending at both the state and federal level." He paused. "But that doesn't undo the damage." "No," Elena said quietly. "It doesn't. Which is why we'd like to offer you a position, Director of Emergency Medical Services. It comes with full administrative authority, a significant salary increase, and the resources to rebuild the culture of this hospital." Elena blinked. "You want me to run the ER?" "We want you to fix what Kane broke." She looked at Voss. "And you're okay with this?" Voss met her eyes. "I should have listened years ago, when the complaints started, when the staff came to me." Her voice was tired. "I convinced myself Kane was just demanding, that high standards required tough leadership. I was wrong." Elena looked down at Sargent. The dog was watching her, tail thumping slowly against the floor. "I need to think about it," she said. Holbrook nodded. "Take your time, but know that this hospital needs you, the staff needs you, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." Bisschwatz. Elena walked out of the administrative building into bright afternoon sunlight. Patricia and the others were waiting. "Well?" Jess asked. "They offered me a job, Director of Emergency Medical Services." Patricia's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Apparently." "What did you say?" Elena looked at the hospital, at the building where she'd spent 3 years being invisible, where she'd swallowed humiliation and accepted cruelty because she thought disappearing was safer than fighting. She thought about Ghostlead, about the person she used to be, about the person she'd tried to stop being. And she realized something. She didn't want to be invisible anymore. "I said I'd think about it," Elena replied. "But you're going to take it," Jess said. It wasn't a question. Elena smiled slightly. "Yeah, I think I am." The group erupted in cheers, but Elena's phone buzzed before she could celebrate. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email, trust me." SW. Elena pulled up her email. The message from Whitmore had an attachment, a PDF labeled Incident Report, Dr. Victor Kane, Confidential. Elena opened it, and her blood went cold. The document was a military investigation report, dated 5 years ago, before Kane had even been hired at Ridgeway Memorial. It detailed an incident at a field hospital in Afghanistan where Dr. Victor Kane, working as a civilian contractor, had been involved in the death of 3 soldiers due to negligence. The investigation had been inconclusive, witnesses conflicted, evidence was murky, and Kane had left the country before it concluded. But buried in the footnotes was a name Elena recognized. Staff Sergeant Marcus Hale, one of the soldiers who'd died. And according to the report, the medic who'd tried to save him, who'd filed the initial complaint against Kane, had been a combat medic attached to special operations. Call sign, Ghost Lead. Elena stared at the screen. She remembered Marcus Hale, remembered holding pressure on a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding, remembered screaming for a surgeon who never came because Kane had been in the next tent dealing with a contractor's minor injury instead of prioritizing combat casualties. She remembered Marcus dying in her arms, and she remembered filing that complaint. The complaint that had gone nowhere, the complaint that Kane had buried. She looked up at the administrative building, at the place where Kane had worked for 6 years, and suddenly everything made sense. Kane hadn't just disliked her because she was competent. He'd recognized her. Maybe not consciously, maybe not immediately, but somewhere deep down he'd known, and he'd spent 3 years punishing her for it. Elena's phone rang. Whitmore. "You read it," the major said. "Yeah." "Kane knew who you were. He had to. The timing's too perfect." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I only got access to the file 2 hours ago. Military records that old, especially ones involving contractor misconduct, are buried deep. But when Kane was arrested, I pulled every file I could find." Whitmore paused. "He destroyed your career once, and then spent 3 years making sure you'd never rise again." Elena closed her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Whitmore asked. Elena looked at Patricia, at Jess, at Dr. Reyes, at the people who'd stood with her. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows," Elena said quietly. "Kane didn't just abuse staff at Ridgeway. He killed soldiers in Afghanistan and got away with it. And I'm going to make sure that story doesn't stay buried. That'll destroy what's left of his reputation." "Good." Whitmore was silent for a moment. Then, "I'll send you the full file. Use it however you need to." The line went dead. Elena forwarded the report to Patricia, to the board, to the state medical board. And then she sent it to the Coldwater Tribune with a single sentence. Dr. Victor Kane's history didn't start at Ridgeway Memorial. It started in Afghanistan, and people died. She hit send, and felt something inside her finally break free. The story broke the next morning. By noon, it was national news. By evening, every major outlet was running pieces about the military contractor who'd caused soldiers' deaths and then buried his past under a civilian medical career. Kane's lawyer issued a statement denying everything. Nobody believed him. The state medical board suspended his license pending investigation. The military opened a new inquiry into the Afghanistan incident, and families of the soldiers who died started calling for justice. Elena watched it all unfold from her apartment, Sergeant curled up beside her on the couch. Her phone rang constantly. Reporters, interview requests, production companies wanting to option her story. She ignored all of them, except one. A call from Derek Morrison, the soldier she'd saved in Kandahar. "I heard what you did," Morrison said. His voice was thick. "About Kane. About Afghanistan. I just told the truth. You gave Marcus's family answers. After 6 years, they finally know what happened." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Thank you." Elena's throat tightened. "I should have pushed harder back then." "You tried. Kane buried it, but it's not buried anymore." They talked for 20 minutes about Afghanistan, about the people they'd lost, about the weight of carrying those memories. When Elena hung up, she felt lighter. Not healed, but lighter. 3 days later, Elena walked back into Ridgeway Memorial. The staff applauded when she entered. She waved them off, embarrassed, and headed to her new office. It was small but functional. A desk, a computer, a window overlooking the parking lot. And on the wall, someone had hung a framed photo. It showed a younger Elena in tactical gear standing beside Sergeant in some desert outpost, both of them covered in dust and looking exhausted but alive. She didn't remember anyone taking that picture, but seeing it now, seeing proof that Ghost Lead had existed, had mattered, had saved lives, made something in her chest ache. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Reyes stepped in. "Welcome back, Director." Elena smiled slightly. "Still getting used to that?" "You'll manage." Reyes held out a folder. "First task. Staffing review. We need to hire 6 more nurses and at least 2 residents. Budget's tight, but the board approved emergency funding." Elena took the folder. "Where do we start?" "Wherever you think we should." Elena looked at the folder, at the opportunity to rebuild, to create something better. Let's start with culture, she said. New hires get trained on respect and accountability from day one. No exceptions, no excuses. Reyes nodded. Sounds good. She left. Elena sat at her desk and opened the folder, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The final piece fell into place 2 weeks later. Elena was reviewing incident reports when her email pinged, a message from the state medical board. She opened it with cautious hope. The board had completed their investigation into Dr. Victor Kane. His medical license was permanently revoked. He was barred from practicing medicine in any capacity, and he was facing criminal charges: assault, theft, destruction of military property, and obstruction of justice. The trial was scheduled for 6 months out. Elena read the email twice. Then she closed her laptop and looked out the window. Sargent was outside in the fenced play area the hospital had built for him, chasing a ball Bennett had thrown. The dog was happy, healthy, home. Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Whitmore. Heard the news. Congratulations. You earned this. Elena smiled and typed back, Thanks for not giving up on me. The reply came instantly. Never. Elena pocketed her phone and stood. She walked out of her office, through the ER, past the trauma bays where she'd spent 3 years being invisible, and she felt, for the first time since leaving the military, like she'd finally found her way back. Not to who she used to be, but to who she was supposed to become. That night, Elena sat on her apartment floor with the black case open in front of her. The tactical armband lay inside, worn and scorched, but still intact. Ghost lead. She picked it up and turned it over in her hands. For 3 years, she'd kept it hidden, buried, a reminder of a life she'd tried to leave behind. But now, holding it, she realized something. Ghost lead wasn't her past. It was part of who she'd always been, and trying to erase that had only made her smaller. She stood and walked to the living room where a shadow box frame waited, the one she'd bought but never used. She placed the armband inside, sealed the frame, and hung it on the wall. Right next to the photo someone had given her, 2 pieces of her history, 2 reminders. She wasn't invisible, she never had been, and she was done pretending otherwise. Elena stepped back and looked at the wall, at Ghost Lead, at the person she'd been and the person she'd become, and she finally let herself believe she deserved both. The envelope arrived 3 days before Kane's preliminary hearing. No return address. Just her name written in careful script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A letter. Elena opened it and started reading. Cross. You win. I hope you're satisfied. You destroyed my career, my reputation, and my life. All because you couldn't follow orders. All because you needed to be special. I hope it was worth it. But here's something you should know. That night in Afghanistan, when Marcus Hale died, I wasn't ignoring combat casualties. I was treating a convoy commander who'd been hit with shrapnel, someone who actually mattered, someone whose survival meant mission success. You filed your complaint and painted me as negligent, but you didn't know the full picture. You never did. Hale was already dead when I got there. The wounds were too severe. He would have died no matter what I did, but you couldn't accept that. You needed someone to blame. So you blamed me. And now, 6 years later, you're still blaming me. I didn't bury your complaint because I was guilty. I buried it because it was wrong. And everything that happened at Ridgeway, every moment I made your life difficult, was because I saw what you really are. Not a hero. A coward who runs from responsibility and hides behind a dog and a call sign. Enjoy your victory, Cross. It won't last. VK. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it aside. She picked up her phone and called Whitmore. I need the complete medical file from the Afghanistan incident, Elena said. Kane just sent me a letter claiming Marcus Hale was unsavable. I want to know if that's true. I'll get it to you within the hour. 60 minutes later, Elena's email pinged. She opened the file and started reading. Medical examiner's report. Time of death. Wound assessment. And buried in the technical language was the truth. Marcus Hale's injuries had been severe, but survivable. If he'd received immediate surgical intervention, which he hadn't, because Kane had been treating minor shrapnel wounds on a convoy commander while a 23-year-old soldier bled out 50 feet away. Elena closed the file and sat back. Kane's letter wasn't a confession. It was a lie. One more attempt to rewrite history, to make himself the victim. But the evidence didn't support it. And Elena had the evidence. She forwarded the file to Kane's prosecutor with a single line. "He's still lying. Here's proof." Then she deleted Kane's letter and never thought about it again. Because Dr. Victor Kane didn't deserve another moment of her time. He'd stolen 3 years. He wasn't getting another second. The preliminary hearing happened on a Wednesday morning in the Coldwater County Courthouse, a brick building that smelled like old wood and stale coffee. Elena sat in the gallery with Whitmore on one side and Patricia on the other. The courtroom was packed, press in the back rows, military personnel in uniform, hospital staff who'd taken the day off just to watch. Dr. Victor Kane sat at the defendant's table in an expensive suit that couldn't hide how much he'd diminished. His shoulders were hunched. His face had gone gray. The arrogance that once defined him had been stripped away, leaving only a hollow man facing consequences he'd spent years believing would never come. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Linda Ochoa, who'd built her career on holding powerful people accountable, stood and began laying out the charges. Assault with a deadly weapon, theft of military property, obstruction of justice, criminal negligence resulting in death, newly added based on the Afghanistan evidence Elena had provided. Each charge hit like a hammer. Kane's lawyer objected, argued, tried to paint his client as a victim of circumstance and vindictive prosecution. Nobody was buying it. When Ochoa called Elena to testify, the courtroom went silent. Elena walked to the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Ochoa approached. "Ms. Cross, can you describe your relationship with Dr. Kane?" "He was my supervisor at Ridgeway Memorial Hospital." "And how would you characterize his treatment of you?" Elena met Kane's eyes across the courtroom. "He made it clear from the beginning that I was beneath his notice. He dismissed my clinical judgment. He reassigned me to less critical roles. And when I finally demonstrated the skills I actually possess, he tried to destroy my career." "Why do you think he targeted you specifically?" Elena paused. This was the moment, the truth she'd carried for weeks. "Because he recognized me. Not consciously at first, maybe, but somewhere deep down, he knew I was the medic who'd filed a complaint against him in Afghanistan, the one who'd tried to hold him accountable for Marcus Hale's death, and he spent 3 years punishing me for it." The courtroom erupted. Kane's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! Speculation!" "It's not speculation," Ochoa interrupted. She held up a document. "We have evidence that Dr. Kane accessed military personnel databases 6 months after Nurse Cross was hired. He searched her name, her service record, her deployment history." She turned to the judge. He knew exactly who she was. The judge looked at Kane. "Is this true?" Kane's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. Kane said nothing. "I'll take that as confirmation," the judge said. "Continue, Miss Ochoa." Ochoa turned back to Elena. "What happened the night Dr. Kane took Sergeant?" Elena described it all. The attack, the tranquilizer, the note, the confrontation in the old medical building. By the time she finished, several people in the gallery were crying. "Thank you, Ms. Cross." Ochoa sat down. Kane's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He tried to discredit her, questioned her memory, suggested she'd exaggerated the danger. Elena answered every question calmly, precisely, without emotion, because the facts spoke for themselves. When she stepped down, Kane was staring at the table, refusing to look at her. The hearing lasted 3 more hours. Witnesses testified. Evidence was presented. Kane's lawyer fought desperately to salvage something, but the damage was done. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was cold. "Mr. Kane, I'm denying bail. You'll remain in custody until trial, and I'm recommending the prosecution pursue the maximum sentence on all charges." She looked at him over her glasses. "You were given a position of trust and authority. You abused both. And when someone tried to hold you accountable, you retaliated with violence. That behavior ends today." The gavel came down. Kane was led away in handcuffs. Elena watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just closure. Outside the courthouse, the press swarmed. Elena ignored them and headed for the parking lot where Whitmore was waiting. "You did good in there," the major said. "I just told the truth." "The truth doesn't always win. Today it did." Whitmore handed her an envelope. "This came through official channels this morning. I thought you should have it now." Elena opened it. Inside was a letter from the Secretary of Defense. "Dear Ms. Cross, it has come to our attention that your service record contains a significant omission. During your deployment to Afghanistan, you were recommended for the Silver Star for actions under fire that directly resulted in the survival of 6 soldiers during a combat engagement. That recommendation was never processed due to administrative oversight. We are correcting that error. Your Silver Star will be awarded in a ceremony at the Pentagon next month. Your presence is requested but not required. Additionally, the families of those 6 soldiers have asked to meet you. They want to thank the person who gave them more time with someone they love. Respectfully, signature." Elena read it twice. "A Silver Star," she said quietly. "You earned it 6 years ago." Whitmore's expression softened. "Someone buried that paperwork. I'm guessing Kane had a hand in it. But it doesn't matter now. You're getting what you should have gotten then." Elena folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. "I don't need a ceremony. It's not about what you need, it's about what those families need. Closure. A chance to say thank you." Whitmore paused. "And it's about making sure the record reflects who you really are." Elena looked at the courthouse, at the building where justice had finally been served. "I'll think about it," she said. Whitmore smiled. "That's all I'm asking." The weeks that followed were a blur. Kane's trial was fast-tracked due to media pressure and overwhelming evidence. He pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence and was given 8 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. His medical license was permanently revoked across all 50 states. The families of the soldiers he'd failed in Afghanistan filed a civil lawsuit. He lost, and every article written about him included the words disgraced, negligent, and abuser. His legacy was destroyed. Meanwhile, Ridgeway Memorial began to heal. Elena restructured the entire emergency department. She hired 6 new nurses, all of them chosen for competence and character, not politics. She implemented new protocols that prioritized staff input and patient outcomes over hierarchy, and she made it clear that anyone who wanted to practice medicine at Ridgeway needed to check their ego at the door. The staff responded. Morale improved. Retention rates climbed. Patient satisfaction scores went up. Dr. Reyes was promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine. Patricia became the head nurse supervisor. Jess was put in charge of training new hires. The hospital transformed, and Elena stood at the center of it, no longer invisible, no longer hiding. But there were still hard days. Days when she woke up at 3 a.m. with her heart racing, remembering the sound of Marcus Hale's breathing as it slowed and stopped. Days when she walked through the ER and saw Dr. Kane in every shadow, even though he was locked away. Days when she wondered if she'd done enough, if she could have fought harder, if she should have spoken up sooner. On one of those days, she found herself sitting in her office with Sargent at her feet, staring at the framed photo on the wall. Ghost lead. The person she used to be. Dr. Reyes knocked and entered. "You okay?" Elena nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "Whether any of this actually changed anything. Kane's gone. The hospital's better. But there are 1,000 other hospitals with 1,000 other Kanes, and most of them never face consequences." Reyes sat down. "You're right. But you changed it here. And everyone who worked with you, everyone who watched you fight, they're going to remember. They're going to speak up next time. They're going to refuse to accept abuse as normal." She leaned forward. "You didn't just take down Kane. You showed people it's possible to win." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't feel like I won." "Why not?" "Because it cost too much. 3 years of my life, Marcus Hale's life, all those other people Kane hurt before I finally did something. You can't carry that. Kane made his choices, you made yours, and your choices saved lives." Elena looked at Sargent. The dog was watching her with those dark, knowing eyes. "I keep thinking about what I would tell my younger self," Elena said. "The version of me who walked into Ridgeway 3 years ago and decided to disappear. If I could go back, what would I say?" "What would you say?" Elena thought about it. "That being small doesn't keep you safe. that silence has a cost, and that the people who hurt you are counting on you to stay quiet. She looked at Reyes. I'd tell her to fight from day one. Would she have listened? Probably not. She wasn't ready. But you're ready now. Elena smiled slightly. Yeah, I think I am. The Pentagon ceremony happened 6 weeks after Kane's sentencing. Elena almost didn't go. She'd spent so many years trying to leave the military behind that the idea of returning, even for recognition, felt wrong. But Whitmore convinced her. Those families need this, the major had said, and whether you believe it or not, you need it too. So Elena flew to Washington with Sargent beside her. Whitmore met them at the airport and drove them to the Pentagon. The ceremony was smaller than Elena expected. Just a conference room with a podium, an American flag, and about 30 people in attendance. The 6 soldiers she'd saved were there, all of them older now, some with families. All of them alive because Elena had refused to leave them behind. One of them, Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, Derek's younger brother, approached her before the ceremony started. I don't remember much from that day, he said, but I remember your voice, telling me to stay awake, telling me I was going to make it. His eyes were wet. I've got 2 kids now. They exist because you didn't give up. Elena's throat tightened. I was just doing my job. No, you were doing more than that. Kyle handed her a photograph. It showed all 6 soldiers standing together at a reunion, smiling, healthy, whole. We wanted you to have this, so you'd know what you gave us. Elena took the photo and couldn't speak. The ceremony began. A general she didn't know read her citation, described the firefight, the casualties, the impossible extraction under enemy fire. Elena stood at attention and let the words wash over her. Then the general pinned the silver star to her uniform and saluted. Elena saluted back. The room applauded. And for the first time in years, Elena let herself believe she deserved it. Afterward, she met the families. Wives who hugged her and cried. Children who shook her hand solemnly. Parents who thanked her for giving them more time with their sons. Each conversation was its own weight, its own reminder, but also its own healing. By the time Elena left the Pentagon, she felt lighter than she had in months. Whitmore walked her to the car. How do you feel? Elena looked at the building behind them, at the place where her service had finally been recognized. Like I can stop running, she said. Whitmore smiled. Good, because I've got one more thing to ask you. What? The military's launching that civilian-military liaison program I mentioned. We need someone to lead it, someone who understands both worlds, someone with experience rebuilding broken systems. Elena looked at her. You want me to train other people to do what I did? I want you to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Teach them how to advocate, how to fight, how to survive in systems designed to crush them. Elena thought about the nurses at Ridgeway, about Dr. Reyes and Jess and Patricia, about every person who'd found their voice because someone else showed them it was possible. I'll do it, she said, but I'm keeping my job at Ridgeway. I'm not leaving. Wouldn't expect you to. This is consulting work, a few days a month, training sessions, program development. Whitmore extended her hand. Welcome to the team. Elena shook it and felt for the first time since leaving Afghanistan like she'd found her mission again. 3 months later, Elena stood in front of 40 medical professionals at a conference center in Denver. They were all civilian providers working in rural hospitals, all of them dealing with difficult supervisors, inadequate resources, and systems that valued hierarchy over outcomes. All of them looking for answers. My name is Elena Cross, she began, and 6 months ago I was a nurse at a small hospital in Wyoming where the chief physician treated me like I was invisible. For 3 years I accepted that. I convinced myself that keeping quiet was safer than fighting back. I was wrong. She told them her story. Not the sanitized version, not the hero's journey, the real version. The one where she made mistakes, where she stayed silent too long, where she almost lost everything because she was too scared to be seen. And then she told them what happened when she finally stopped hiding. You're going to face people who want you small, Elena said. Supervisors who dismiss you, colleagues who undermine you, systems designed to keep you in your place, and you'll have a choice. You can accept it, or you can fight. She paused. Fighting is hard, It's terrifying. You might lose your job, your reputation, your sense of safety. But here's what I learned. Staying silent costs more. Because every day you accept abuse, you're teaching the next person that abuse is normal. And eventually, someone gets hurt. A patient, a colleague, you. The room was silent. So here's what I want you to remember, Elena continued. You are not invisible, you are not disposable, and you are not alone. When you speak up, when you refuse to accept what's unacceptable, you give everyone around you permission to do the same. That's how systems change, one person at a time, one voice at a time. She looked at the faces staring back at her. Nurses, medics, doctors, all of them carrying their own stories, their own scars. You have power, Elena said. Even when they tell you you don't, use it. The applause started slowly. Then it built. By the time Elena left the stage, people were standing. And she knew with absolute certainty, that this was what she was meant to do. Not just survive, but teach others how to survive. And then how to win. 6 months after Kane's sentencing, Elena received a letter. It was from Marcus Hale's mother. Dear Elena, I wanted to write to you for a long time, but didn't know what to say. How do you thank someone for trying to save your son when he died anyway? How do you tell them that knowing they tried, that knowing someone cared enough to fight, makes the loss just a little bit more bearable? I read about what happened with Dr. Kane, about how he hurt you, about how you fought back and won, and I wanted you to know that Marcus would be proud of you. He always said the best medics weren't the ones with the most skills. They were the ones who refused to give up, who kept fighting even when the situation was hopeless. That's who you are. And even though my son didn't survive, you gave him a chance. You fought for him when someone else walked away. Thank you for that. Thank you for trying. And thank you for making sure Dr. Kane couldn't do to anyone else what he did to Marcus. You're a hero, even if you don't feel like one. With gratitude, Susan Hale. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the shadow box on her wall, next to the ghost lead armband and the photo of the 6 soldiers she'd saved. Reminders, not of perfection, but of persistence, of refusing to give up, of fighting even when the fight seemed impossible. In fact, 1 year after the preliminary hearing, Elena sat in her office at Ridgeway Memorial and looked at the schedule for the week. 2 training sessions in Montana, a conference presentation in Colorado, a consultation with a hospital in Nebraska dealing with a toxic chief of surgery. Her calendar was full. Her purpose was clear. She wasn't just running an ER anymore. She was building a movement. Sergeant lay at her feet, chin resting on his paws, watching her with contentment. Dr. Reyes knocked and entered. Got a minute? Always. Reyes sat down. We just got the quarterly review back from the state. Patient outcomes are up. Staff retention is at 94%. And we've been nominated for a national award for workplace culture. Elena raised her eyebrows. Seriously? Seriously. Turns out when you treat people with respect and give them a voice, they do better work. Who knew? Elena laughed. Shocking. Reyes leaned back. You know what the best part is? Other hospitals are calling, asking how we did it, wanting to replicate the model. She paused. You started something, Elena. Something bigger than Ridgeway. Elena looked at the shadow box on the wall, at Ghost Lead, at the soldiers, at the letter from Marcus Hale's mother. I didn't start it, she said quietly. I just refused to stay quiet. That's the same thing. Maybe. Reyes stood. Well, whatever you call it, keep doing it. People need to see that standing up actually works. She left. Elena sat alone in her office, sergeants breathing steady and calm, and thought about the person she'd been 3 years ago. The woman who walked into Ridgeway Memorial and decided disappearing was safer than fighting. The woman who swallowed humiliation because she thought it was the cost of survival. The woman who believed she had to be small to be safe. That woman was gone. Not because she'd been weak, but because she'd finally learned the truth. Silence doesn't protect you. It just makes the abuse easier. And the moment you decide to speak, to stand, to fight, everything changes. Not instantly, not perfectly, but inevitably. Elena picked up her phone and called the hospital in Nebraska. "This is Elena Cross. I understand you've got a situation with your chief of surgery. Tell me what's happening." She listened, took notes, started building a plan. Because this was her mission now. Not just surviving, but making sure others survived too. And teaching them that the power they think they don't have, it was there all along. They just had to stop being afraid to use it. Dad. 2 years after everything began, Elena stood on the steps of Ridgeway Memorial at dawn, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Sergeant sat beside her, gray starting to show around his muzzle, but his eyes still sharp. The hospital behind her was quiet. The night shift was ending, the day shift arriving. Somewhere inside, nurses were checking patients. Doctors were reviewing charts. Lives were being saved by people who no longer had to choose between their careers and their dignity. Elena thought about Dr. Victor Kane, locked away in federal prison, his name synonymous with abuse and negligence. She thought about the nurses who'd stood with her when standing meant risking everything. She thought about Marcus Hale and the soldiers she'd saved and every person who'd been hurt by someone who believed power meant they could do whatever they wanted. And she thought about the future, about the hospitals that were changing, the people who were speaking up, the systems being rebuilt. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't complete, but it was happening. And Elena Cross, the woman once called Ghost Lead, the woman who'd spent 3 years trying to disappear, was at the center of it. Not because she was special, but because she'd refused to accept that suffering was the price of survival. Sergeant nudged her leg. Elena looked down at him and smiled. "Come on," she said. "Let's go to work." They walked back into the hospital together, and Elena knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. Not invisible, not broken, not defeated, but standing, fighting, winning, and teaching everyone around her that they could do the same. Because that was the lesson. The one that mattered more than medals or recognition or revenge. You don't have to accept abuse. You don't have to stay small. You don't have to be silent. And the moment you decide you deserve better, the moment you stand up and say no more, you discover something extraordinary. You were never powerless. You were just waiting for permission to be strong. And you don't need anyone's permission. You never did. Elena Cross walked through the doors of Ridgeway Memorial, the morning light at her back, and got to work. Because there were lives to save, people to protect, and a world that desperately needed to learn that the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones everyone underestimates, they're the most dangerous of all, not because they're cruel, but because once they stop hiding, they're unstoppable. And Elena Cross was done hiding forever.